A very warm welcome and hello to all of you joining us from regions around the globe. My name is Marcia Fingal, and I'm the Chief Outreach Officer and Global Impact Program Manager for Intersections International. I will be your host for today's program, and it is our hope to have a very integrated conversation with all of you. That includes our presenters and our audience, so please use our chat features freely. Share your ideas, your comments, your suggestions, and use the Q&A for all of your questions. We'll also be taping today's program, so please be aware of that, and we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. All right, so let's get started. Keep the faith, hope and healing, a global perspective on women's voices, multi-faith voices of women making a difference in the communities they serve, in the art and music they create, in the advocacy they do. Let us now welcome the Collegiate Senior Minister serving as Executive Director for Intersections International, the Reverend Julie Johnson Staples.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Keep the Faith. I'm so pleased to join you from our offices here in New York at this virtual gathering, bringing women's voices together from around the world to share perspectives of faith, hope, and healing. My name is Julie Johnson Staples, and I'm a senior minister serving the Collegiate Church of New York, the oldest church in North America, which has a specialized ministry established as an NGO at the United Nations. We're called Intersections International. Normally, our office is bustling with activity with the work of our two core programs, Global Peacemaking, which works to heal the rifts that divide and separate humanity, and Believe Out Loud, our signature social justice program at the intersections of LGBT justice, faith, and equality. But because of COVID-19, we pivoted immediately to a work-from-home environment. Now, all but two of us work remotely 95% of the time. As I stand in our New York offices today, I am grateful for the strong partnership and work we've done together with the Amana Centre and FELM. Earlier this year, I traveled to Oman to plan what was intended to be a global women's symposium in April. As Reverend Alra Ritken and I worked tirelessly to prepare introductory letters, outline the program, and finalize concept notes, already the world was changing. When I was in Oman, all flags flew at half-staff, and the nation was in grief following the death of the Sultan. Little did we then realize that the entire world was heading toward a cataclysmic shift, change, pause, and shutdown before a new way of life was ushered in by spring, by the novel coronavirus, or COVID-19. I am privileged to welcome each of you here today for deep listening and engaged sharing. We will delve deeply into what hope and healing looks like during a pandemic that has been especially hard on women and girls. The pandemic has crushed economies and transformed normal life. Travel, once a normal part of our service delivery, has ground to a halt. But the virus has also brought us unexpected revelation. The brutality of income inequality and healthcare outcome disparities has made it so crystal clear that our mission is ever more urgent. We have convened at this moment to make space for women to share unique and important perspectives and build new networks with fresh solutions together. I am confident that these diverse messages of faith, hope, and healing will fill your hearts. Let us move forward together, sharing from reservoirs of resilience and hope, so that we might effectively and tirelessly provide services and relief to those most in need. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your voices, and thank you for your work to make this a better world.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world. My name is Justin Myers. I'm the Associate Director of the Amana Centre, and it's my extreme pleasure to welcome you to this two-day event as we listen to women's voices from around the world as they tell us about where they find hope and how they experience healing in this day and age of COVID-19. I'm grateful that you've taken this chance to listen with me. I look forward to these next 2 days and hearing from you all as well as we as we listen, as we dream, as we hope, and hopefully at the end find some concrete ways to bring hope and healing to our communities, no matter where they are. Once again, thank you for joining us. May God bless our time together.
Hello everybody, my name is Janetta Vettenranta and I'm Regional Director of FELM. On behalf of FELM, I would like to welcome you to this Symposium of Hope and Healing. It is our wish that in the coming days you will feel inspired, and it might also bring you new ideas how to bring hope and healing into your communities. I would like to thank you for taking your time and also taking part of these very important discussions.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ونعم أجر العاملين قد خلت من قبلكم سنن فسيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين هذا بيان للناس وهدى وموعظة للمتقين ولا تهنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم الأعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين إن يمسسكم قرح فقد مس القوم قرح مثله وتلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس وليعلم الله الذين آمنوا ويتخذ منكم شهداء والله لا يحب الظالمين.
From From Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountain fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, and she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see the works of the Lord, desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Now the dwelling of God is with people, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Thanks be to God.
In the Buddhist tradition, we practice with metta, or loving kindness, as a way of orienting the mind toward our capacity for happiness and joy. So I offer you this metta prayer. In gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. May those we easily love and cherish be happy and joyful. May they be free from all forms of suffering, physical and mental. May they feel safe. May they live with ease. And may the many people in this world whom we don't know well be happy and joyful. And may they be free from all forms of suffering, both physical and mental. May they be safe. And may they live with ease. And may the people with whom we've had difficulty or conflict be happy and joyful. May they be free from all forms of suffering, physical and mental. May they be safe, and may they live with ease. May those born and to be born, the seen and the unseen, the mighty, the great, the struggling, the suffering, may they all find the causes and conditions that support them in their most genuine well-being, peace, and contentment.
Shalom. For me, Jewish tradition is full of stories of hope, rituals of hope, but if I'm going to bring a woman's perspective today, the first thing I think of is our prophet, Miriam. But before I think of Miriam and her drums and the Israelite women's drums, I think of an oud. I met it a few years ago at a Museum of Jewish Heritage, and the tour guide said to us, look at this exhibit. Everything here, somebody carried with them when they had to flee their homes. Find something that speaks to you. Tell its story. I'd never met an oud before. It's an instrument with a wide, rounded bottom, and the neck is sort of like this, and it was inlaid with mother of pearl. It was beautiful. It was huge. And I stopped and got stuck there because how? Why would someone, when she's looking around and saying, I need to pack food for the baby and I need to have our books and everything precious to us and I'm never going to see my home again, how does she choose that to fit on her back? It turns out Rabbi Yishmael, 1,000 years before me, asked the same question when he read the text of Exodus and got to Miriam and her sisters dancing with their drums. His question was not about the water, and his question was, how do you get instruments in the middle of the desert? And that is the question. How does a woman who does not have time for the bread to rise look around and say, I must bring my drums? And how does an enslaved woman, from generations of enslaved women, how does she own a drum? How does she make a drum? How does she know how to use it? How does she learn to dance? And the answer is hope. Rabbi Yishmael says, these tzidkaniot, these social justice warriors, knew that God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was coming with a miracle for them, and they had to be ready. So they took their instruments, they built their instruments, they kept their instruments, and that is what they took with them for that moment that they knew was coming. And they danced even though they maybe never danced before, even though their bodies had probably only known hardship and effort and heaviness. In that moment, in the sea, they had their instruments of hope ready to go, and they were prepared for that moment of joy and relief, for that miracle. We don't have similar hundreds of years, but we have hundreds of days at home. We have thousands of hours in all that heaviness, in all that we are living with. That's plenty of time to find an instrument, make an instrument, learn how to play it, so that you're ready to dance with your sisters, so that you're ready to dance with your siblings.
Satnam, everybody. My name is Suri Sadhana Kaur.
Satnam, I'm Adipriya Kaur.
And we're from London in the UK. And we're going to share some mantras with you from the Kundalini yogic tradition. And the first mantra that we're going to share is Ik Onkara Satguru Prasad. It's known as the Siddhi mantra or the magic mantra. Siddhi means great, and it is a great mantra. It works to clear blocks and remove obstacles that stand in the way of you being with your ultimate freedom, your ultimate wisdom, your ultimate joy. So as you chant over and over again, please join us and allow the creative spirit within you to move together freely.
Satguru Prasad, Ik Onkar Satguru Prasad, Satguru Prasad, Ik Onkar Satguru Prasad, Satguru Prasad, Ik Onkar Satguru Prasad, Satguru Prasad, Ikongar Satgur Prasad, Satgur 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 Prasad, Ikongar.
Now we will view 4 presentations. The first will be from Agnes Abum, moderator of the World Council of Churches in Kenya. Then my dear friend and colleague Yvonne Benson Itahosa, founder and executive director of Pathfinders Justice Initiative, Nigeria. Yvonne will be followed by Anika Nawabi of New York's Muslim Community Network. Then we will have Suborna Palidrang from Shanti Mitra in Bangladesh.
COVID has affected our work in many ways. Particularly, I'll be looking at our company and also at our work in the World Council of Churches. From TAPCO perspective, it meant that the lockdown, staff had to stop accompanying clients, churches, and church-based organizations in their socio-economic projects and in their organizational, institutional development, and as peace-building accompanier in the region. As a result, it has meant that many of my colleagues had to lay down their tools, thus affecting their movement and loss of income. The second impact is that the donors redirected funding resources to provide humanitarian assistance to the vulnerable groups, particularly the elderly, without food and shelter in the informal settlements, and to create awareness on the impact of the COVID pandemic, and also distribute PPE tools, especially assisting governments to refurbish health structures so that they could provide spaces for victims of COVID. An example of this is the Anglican Development Services, which has embarked on a fundraising to cater and support communities around the country by raising local resources, in addition to what they receive from donors. The third is that COVID has actually exacerbated the levels of poverty and unemployment. It is difficult, of course, to determine the numbers, but we can see with the closures of companies and industries many people are laid off and therefore very anxious, very stressed, and the result of shrinking middle class, particularly upper middle class, has meant that poverty has deepened, impacting very negatively and disproportionately on women, who are the dominant group in the small businesses due to the traction in the purchasing power. The fourth is the impact on family. While on the one hand, we have seen that families are more together, more time to worship, to fellowship, to be family. It is good, but what that has meant on the other hand is an increase in domestic and gender-based violence. The numbers of GBV cases and SGBV can easily be compared to those that take place in conflict situations, a very worrying trend indeed. The fifth impact is schools. We may not have understood what that would have meant. The fact that schools were closed with no alternatives, spaces for children, and who became confined in their homes meant that they were exposed to sexual violence, and many have become parents as teens and even younger than young adults. The work on children and the need to pay special attention is more apparent as the confinement of children in the homes seems to create more anxiety, a new situation of stress for both children and parents. Let me look at the impact at the level of World Council of Churches. We were meant to have held our Central Committee meeting in March, which is the highest decision-making body, in order to elect a new General Secretary. This did not happen, which has meant that we are not sure when we will do this, and this is the only organ mandated constitutionally to elect a General Secretary. Secondly, we are preparing for an assembly, and in terms of finalization of the list of delegates, it is the duty of this body. It therefore means that it is difficult to know how we shall move, not that there is a gap in leadership, but official designated leadership. And we are working mainly with interim leadership. It is our hope that the situation will improve in 2021 to facilitate the functioning of WCC. What gives me hope? Hope is a fundamental issue to me as a woman of faith, because it is that which affects and impacts my daily living and practice of faith. In spite of increased poverty, isolation, and loneliness, limited movement of people, thus making many to feel unloved, prayers of thanksgiving for the gift of life are offered in many, many places. Messages of encouragement have flooded social media. Online communication has replaced physical gathering. Second, families have found alternative ways to fellowship and worship and to be together. In addition, families are also able to share the limited resources with one another, affirming the adage that you are because I am because you are. This sharing of solidarity, of resources, of being there for one another is indeed a faith factor. A prominent female leader in South Sudan shared her experience of how she holds services for the family and at the end of the service collect offering, which is forwarded to the church. We believe that this is a new approach of being church, but also of sustaining the ministry of the church. My own hope stems from the fact that we have been able to fellowship as a family, to share as a family, but also to inspire one another to continue to hope in a better tomorrow. My hope is also raised when I hear testimonies of women communities regarding their resilience in the midst of displacement, loss of loved ones, and especially women who do not give up. Instead, they find new ways to put food on the table for their families and to take care of their families as caregivers, particularly the elderly, the vulnerable, and those who have been impacted by COVID. Their innovative ways of adaptation inspires me and gives me hope indeed. Increased voices of men and women advocating for an end to sexual and gender-based violence is for me one of the most inspiring things that I've seen from COVID. During the current 16 days of activism, I have witnessed popular theater highlight the evil of rape and sexual violence and the need to end impunity of perpetrators by taking legal measures. Further, despite the inability to meet physically as governing organs of WCC or accompany clients in their organizational strengthening, work has not stopped completely as online meetings and conferences take place, and encouraging because it is also a new way of saving resources and still being able to do what is of necessity. Whilst movement has been constrained due to lockdown, limited air travel has reduced carbon footprint. And hopefully, even if we have to travel in future, it should be when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we can do more online and reduce costs as we also clean our air. The caveat, though, is to ensure that internet access is more broadly available and inclusive. Finally, the other thing that gives me hope is the appreciation of life in a new way during this COVID. Many rich and poor realize the fragility of life irrespective of one's social and economic status. Hence, a new way of appreciating the gift of life, a life that we cannot as human beings give nor sustain, but God Himself, the Creator, gives us. What does healing feel like in my context? Healing is a long way, but slowly beginning to unfold. Families and communities have to reckon with increased mental health. Individuals have to look for alternative health support systems as health facilities and personnel are inadequate and unable to cope with numbers of deaths and patients from the second wave of the pandemic. May I share 3 scenarios that might help you try to visualize what healing might mean in this context. First is, at the onset of the pandemic, those who succumbed were buried unceremoniously. Family members were not allowed to accompany their loved ones, and the burial rites had to be within 1.5 hours. Indeed, culturally and religiously, we were not able to honor our dead. Therefore, the trauma of losing loved ones is itself a major trauma. But even more tragic is the inability to give the dead a decent final rite. Remember, the clergy were not allowed to conduct pastoral visits and comfort the bereaved. The healing of psychosocial impact is taking long, and moreover, in the rural areas, there is stigmatization of those perceived or known to be COVID positive, although not to the level of HIV/AIDS years ago. A second case is sexual and gender-based violence, and more specifically, rape and incest in the family. Domestic and related violence has been on the increase, and few facilities are there to address incest, since it is a major taboo that affects the family and respective individuals, particularly trust and integrity. Healing is rather slow, and the family and individual lives are fractured, sometimes beyond repair because of deaths as a result, suicides by perpetrators, suicides committed by victims, and therefore we see trauma cycles continue. A third case is the people testing positive in hospitals. Many are admitted, but others are not due to lack of beds and are asked to self-confine in their homes. In this situation, the spirit of fear, anxiety, and despair creeps in, and patients are treated like less human. An example is of an elderly lady who underwent the COVID test, and as she waited for result, she was locked in the room, no visitor, and food was left at her doorstep to be picked by herself. No interaction, thus inhumane treatment. Fortunately, she tested negative, but this brief and yet intense experience of being treated less human left her with an emotional scar and a feeling of not being loved. To conclude, healing and hope processes must continue to take place, and we need to be careful that they are inclusive, they are sensitive to the needs of people, that the poor and vulnerable have not come to a point of testing because they are not sure of how they will be treated. And therefore, if healing has to take place, we need to have a positive approach to the healing processes. We need to understand that alternative medicine is also necessary to facilitate the healing. We need to care for the caregivers and particularly frontline hospital staff because they are really affected. While healing is taking place, there's however need to think and provide additional support mechanisms for caregivers, many of whom are women, skills for post-traumatic disorder and mental health, rehabilitation of children, young people, parents, and especially girls whose future seems mortgaged by the rapists in the family and the neighborhood. May COVID pandemic, whose effects will be with humanity for longer than we can expect, be a wake-up call to be inclusive in all spheres of life and in our interactions and in our worship life as they either work from home or have no work at home. So, as I conclude, therefore, healing is critical. We need to understand it is a process that will need to restore the dignity of families, of communities, and particularly of those affected, those who've lost their parents, those who've lost their loved ones. Healing, it will be more than physical, it will be emotional, it will be mental, and it will be inclusive. God bless us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yvonne Benson Idahosa, and it's my absolute pleasure to be able to be here with you today to share a little bit about how hope and healing have been instrumental in my life and in our work over the last 10 months. When people ask me what I do, I often say that I stretch tight shoes. And usually the next question is, what, how, what does that mean? But as a young child growing up in Nigeria, my mother would often summon my sisters and I just before she left for a trip to England or to the US. And she would literally trace our feet on pieces of paper. Upon her arrival abroad, she would then take these drawings to a shoe store in an effort to estimate our shoe sizes to purchase shoes for us. And sometimes the shoes that she would return back to Nigeria with worked, and other times painfully, excruciatingly, they actually didn't work because they didn't fit us. And this would mean me often wearing the smaller shoes of my sisters for some time in order to stretch them out, right, to make them more comfortable for them to walk. But as I grew older, I realized that posture became consistent in my life. And it was ultimately what God had called me to do, i.e. to stretch tight shoes, create more space for women and girls at the table. And so I consider myself rather fortunate to be able to do the work that we do at the NGO that I founded 6 years ago, Pathfinders. We work with women survivors of sex trafficking and sexual violence in Nigeria. It is the work of justice, of making that which is unseen seen, of standing in spiritual defiance of what is, of reconciling, right, our everyday reality to God's intention. It truly is sacred work. Because the truth of the matter is that the bodies of African women, including those that we partner with, are some of the most weaponized and legislated upon in the entire world. Any of us who do this work know that we stand as intercessors. But generally speaking, our work is threefold. First, we partner with survivors of sex trafficking and sexual violence, many of whom have recently repatriated to Nigeria after having their bodies literally consumed and recycled on thousands of occasions by the European sex industry. We partner with them to provide holistic rehabilitation on their terms, right? We refer to these as path plans, as personalized action to healing plans that are powered by the voices of survivors while returning their agency and self-determination. We also work to dismantle inequitable social structures by demanding accountability from those who have the power to end trafficking and sexual violence against women in Nigeria, by influencing the influencers, right? Through trainings, through workshops, through partnerships. We are striving towards a form of redemptive rescripting that shifts that power to those from whom it has been stripped. Finally, we're not only speaking truth to power, but also speaking truth to the seemingly powerless, right, through the awareness raising arm of our work. Here we engage a community to see trafficking, to see sexual violence as a crime, not solely against the individual, but also against the community itself. That shift in power dynamics is what we empower the community to reclaim. But right when we were all getting our stride as thought leaders, as a leading voice in the fight against trafficking in Nigeria, the entire world stopped, literally stopped. Perhaps I wouldn't have, but I was forced to after contracting COVID-19 in March of 2020. We all had to pivot. I had to pivot. There were days that I wasn't sure I would awaken the next morning, days that my final prayer every night was that God would not allow my 14-year-old daughter to find me lifeless. But it was in those moments that I was facing what some would call an existential crisis that I miraculously summoned up the courage to choose hope over paralyzing fear. You see, hope became this renewable resource for me that connected my faith to the substance of things hoped for, right? To the evidence of things not seen. But as hard as those moments were, there were lessons that I learned both in my personal life as a leader and also in the work that we do in Nigeria. The first was that choosing hope is an act of resistance, right? It's an act of resistance in much the same way that me showing up as myself, me taking up my own space at the table as a Black African woman is often an act of resistance in a world that has intentionally denied access for us. Hope seeks out the beauty in a kingdom that is here, but not yet. It propels us into sitting with that pain and suffering and ultimately finding a way to curate all of it, all that ashes into beauty. And no one exemplified this sentiment more than our survivors who also chose hope. Hope over circumstances that triggered their past trauma, hope over what threatened to obliterate the walls of the lives that they had painstakingly began to rebuild. With most of them working in the informal sector that required that they work daily to eat, to survive, to feed their children, they chose hope when they trusted us as we encouraged them to pivot, to re-strategize, to bring their businesses online or to engage in mobile services, all while facing debilitating lockdowns and curfews. Hope certainly is an act of resistance. Secondly, hope is a healer, right? It's a healer that, as Walter Wink would say, envisions an alternate reality, an alternate future to the one fated by the momentum of current forces. It calls forth, in my experience, that which is unseen, and it hinges the moment to a future that is anchored on God's redemptive plan. It is what stands at the intersection of our brokenness and that plan. And in embracing it, in applying it as the balm of Gilead, we start to heal. I started to heal, and so did our survivors. Hope is also a person, right? In much the same way that grace and truth are embodied in Christ, who in the scriptures assures us that as he is, so are we in this world. I began to seek that grace, that truth, that hope in those that God had sent to support me during that season. It showed up in the eyes of my daughter every day. It showed up through the groceries and the food that some of my friends forced over my pride. It showed up in the FaceTime calls with my team and our survivors who prayed for my healing as I did for theirs. Finally, hope seeks out and ignites a community of light. Hope seeks out hope and ignites a community, right? And what I mean by that is that it surfaces to connect the like-minded. Over the summer, as we watched America reckon with the fruit of racial injustice, hope was what connected millions of people around the world who demanded the change they wanted to see. Hope is also what unified me and many activists, some of whom are in this conference, to demand that the Nigerian government bring back our girls. The 276 girls from Chibok, Nigeria, who had been violently stolen from their lives by Boko Haram, a terrorist group in Nigeria. Almost 7 years later, 112 of them remain missing. And Bring Back Our Girls for me has transformed into a prayer, a daily prayer that I utter unto God. Hope endures. And so as we end this unprecedented year, I, like many other survivors, continue on our journey to wholeness in our healing. But we persevere for the sake of those against whom marginalization has been used as a tool of oppression. Yes, there is a balm in Gilead, but we have been called to apply it. We have been tasked with rescripting the narrative, with praying into being God's justice. With hope, we collectively stand at the intersection of our world's brokenness and God's redemptive plan. And at the end of the day, hope wins. Hope wins. Thank you so much for listening.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Anika Nawabi, and I am the Executive Director at the Muslim Community Network. We're based here in New York City. We are a civil society-based nonprofit organization with a mission of developing the civic leadership of Muslim Americans in an effort to help shape the narrative about what it means to be Muslim in the United States of America, as well as globally. This work really began post 9/11, when Muslims were kind of a very negative light was being shined upon Muslim Americans, and the resulting discrimination, misunderstanding of who we are as a community overall, kind of led us to start this work as a nonprofit organization, and also to educate our own community about their rights in the United States, and the helping them develop a voice in this whole maelstrom of narratives that were being written about the Muslim community. So we do this in basically 3 different programmatic buckets. One of them being our community education program. Our community education program includes both educating the non-Muslim community about who we are as Muslim Americans, as well as educating our Muslim community about their civil rights in the United States. After 9/11, we saw a number of deportations. The Patriot Act had initiated a surveillance system that was targeting Muslim Americans wrongfully and such. So we wanted to make sure that Muslim Americans, they knew their rights and they knew how to advocate for themselves and advocate against these laws that demonize them based on their faith and religious identity. Complementary to this is educating the non-Muslim community, and we do this through our diversity education trainings. We would go into schools and present to young students as well as teachers and administrators about who we are as Muslims, and they were able to hear who we are by Muslims. A lot of the times we saw problems in the education curriculum when it came to teaching about Islam. It started from a vantage point of 9/11 instead of starting from the historical origins of of where Islam originated from and so forth, and as being one of the largest monotheistic religions in the world. So by seeing these problems, we felt that it was important that we correct some of these curricular, descriptions, and we came in with our own toolkit to empower teachers to help students learn about who we are as Muslim Americans. So that has been one of our most impactful programs, and we've started to actually expand the diversity education program to go into private practices, government offices, as well as some global institutions who have approached us to conduct these diversity ed presentations. The second programmatic bucket in helping us shape the narrative is our youth leadership program. We feel that youth make up a very large part of how they're going to be living as Muslim Americans in the world, in the United States and the world, and that they are the voice for change. So we kind of take it very seriously here at MCN to train our youth, to provide them the tools necessary to be able to be self-advocates for themselves, and also teach their families and their parents and their elders in the community about their civic duties and responsibilities in the United States. So that's our second programmatic bucket. Our third programmatic bucket is our community service program. So what is a better way to help shape the narrative than to show that Muslim Americans are regular neighbors who want to give, who give back to the community, and we do this in a number of ways, such as we run an interfaith soup kitchen every month. We engage in a number of interfaith dialogue and initiatives on peace building. We do park cleanups. We do food packathons. In fact, this past Thanksgiving, we packed 240 meals, Thanksgiving, like turkey meals, that we provided to residents of the New York City Housing Authority. So that was a really successful program. And again, this shows that Muslim Americans are just your regular neighbors, and we look forward to giving back to our community, as that makes up a large part of our own faith traditions as well. So the theme of this conference being hope and healing, the work of MCN really delves into building hope and healing, both within the Muslim community as well as between Muslim and non-Muslim communities, to bridge understanding, to build bridges of friendship and communication, so that Muslim Americans are not looked as an alien entity or as the other, but rather that we are very much part of the American historical building of America in itself. In fact, our diversity education presentations, we begin by saying that some of the earliest Americans who helped build this nation were Muslims. The slaves, the first slaves who came into this country, were actually Muslims from West Africa. Again, a part of the narrative that is often not shared. I want to quickly go into our work that we've been doing during COVID-19. And, I talked a little bit about how our work in building bridges and understanding in helping shape the narrative builds hope and healing for our communities, for our diverse communities that reside in the United States. But COVID-19, it hit us. It was indiscriminate to any race or religion, and it hit all populations. But the people of color, the populations minority communities, they have been the hardest hit in this process. So what we've done in MCN, we actually started a hotline, a community hotline, where community members can pick up the phone and they can call in, and we provide immediate cash assistance or we connect them to some resource that they are essentially seeking. We've helped around 90 families so far. We've gotten far more calls than what we have available to provide, but we've actually helped 90 families, giving them small emergency cash assistance, connecting them to volunteers who can deliver food. And one thing that we've seen through these calls is we've been getting a lot of calls from widows, women who have lost their spouses to COVID-19. These are immigrant women who have children who can't go out and work because they have to provide childcare, and yet their primary bread earner has died. So this is one way we've observed the negative impact of COVID-19 on women. Another observation we've seen is that domestic violence has gone up at certain institutions by 25 to 50% during this time, and shelters are actually overwhelmed by the amount of callers that are coming in that need help and support. So these two stories of the primary breadwinners passing away, the woman having to take care of the children, unable to go out and work and find a living for themselves, as well as the rise in domestic violence, are two trends that have impacted women in our community, in the Muslim community, particularly hard. And MCN, we're trying to provide cash assistance and provide counselors and connect these individuals to counselors and resources. But it absolutely is a crisis in the community, and it's a crisis that we, as a civil society institution, we acknowledge. We try to mitigate it, and we want to try to provide some sort of hope and healing, even if it's someone picking up the call and listening to the story, that we can provide at our best. But these are essentially some of the things that we've been doing, and I hope that you'll probably hear similar stories around the globe about this. But from here, New York City, that is my update, and I hope and pray for healing for everyone around the world who's experiencing this global pandemic. So thank you very much, and wishing everyone a joyous and healing end of the year. Hopefully we come up with a solution very soon. Thank you and goodbye.
ময়মনসিংহ বাংলাদেশের রাজধানী ঢাকা থেকে উত্তর কেন্দ্রে অবস্থিত। ময়মনসিংহ শহর ব্রহ্মপুত্র নদের তীরে অবস্থিত। আনুমানিক 14 লক্ষ বিভিন্ন জাতিগোষ্ঠী ও বিভিন্ন ধর্মের মানুষের বাস এই ময়মনসিংহ শহরে। শান্তিমিত্র একটি অলাভজনক বেসরকারি সংস্থা যা 2007 সালে প্রতিষ্ঠিত হয়। শান্তিমিত্র মূলত শান্তি স্থাপন ও দ্বন্দ্ব রূপান্তরের জন্য কাজ করে। শান্তিমিত্র আশা করে শান্তি শিক্ষার মাধ্যমে শিশুদের ইতিবাচক আচরণ ও দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি বৃদ্ধি পাবে এবং শিশুরা শান্তিপূর্ণ পৃথিবীর জন্য স্বপ্ন দেখতে ও কাজ করতে অনুপ্রাণিত হবে। আমাদের বিদ্যালয়ে প্রায় 450 ছাত্রছাত্রী অধ্যয়ন করছে। এর মধ্যে বেশিরভাগ শিশুই দরিদ্র হতদরিদ্র পরিবার থেকে আসা। আমাদের বিদ্যালয়ের শিশুরা মূলত বেড়ে উঠেছে একটা প্রতিকূল পরিবেশের মধ্য দিয়ে। পরিবারে বিভিন্ন ধরনের সমস্যাকে ফেস করে ওরা প্রতিনিয়ত সমস্যায় জর্জরিত।
শান্তি ক্লাস নেওয়ার আগে আমরা আমাদের আগে প্রস্তুতি নিই, কারণ কাউকে যদি কিছু দিতে চাই আমরা, তো প্রথমত আমাদের শিখতে হয়। যেমন যদি আমি অন্যকে, আমাদের একটা শান্তি আবার সংজ্ঞাও আছে, নিজেকে যত্ন, শান্তি বলতে আমরা বুঝি নিজেকে যত্ন, অপরকে যত্ন এবং পরিবেশ এবং পৃথিবীর যত্ন। এখন নিজেকে যত্ন বলতে যদি আমি নিজের মধ্যে যে শিক্ষা ধারণ না করি, নৈতিক শিক্ষা ধারণা যদি না করি, তো আমি কীভাবে অন্যকে শিক্ষা দেব? তো প্রথমে আমরা আগে আমাদের পিস ক্লাস করানোর আগে পিস ক্লাস প্রিপারেশন করে আমরা নিজে আমাদের প্রস্তুতি নিয়ে নেই।
আমার প্রিয় গল্প আলবার্টের গল্প। আগে আমি পশুপাখি পাখিদের মারতাম, এখন মারি না। যেদিন থেকে শান্তি ক্লাসে আলবার্টের গল্প শুনেছি, এদিন থেকে পশু পাখিদের যত্ন করছি।
আমাদের বিদ্যালয়ে শান্তি ক্লাস অত্যন্ত জরুরি, কারণ আমি এই বয়সে দেখতে পাই শিশুদের মধ্যে কি করে নিজেদের মধ্যে সুন্দর সহভাগিতা দেখতে পাই। আমাদের শিশুরা বিভিন্ন দ্বন্দ্বে নিজেরা মধ্যস্থতা হিসেবে ভূমিকা রাখছে।
এখানে কিছু নতুন কিছু শেখার আছে, একটা গল্প শিখতে পাই, একটা গান শিখতে পাই, আরও কিছু খেলা শিখতে পাই। আগে আমার রাগ উঠলে আমি কিছু বলতাম না, আমি সবাইকে মারধর করতাম। এই শান্তি ক্লাসে আসার পর আমি আমার রাগ নিয়ন্ত্রণ করতে পারি। ধন্যবাদ।
আমার শান্তি ক্লাস করতে ভালো লাগে। আমি শান্তি ক্লাসে নিয়মিত যাই। শান্তি ক্লাস থেকে আমি অনেক কিছু শিখেছি, যেরকম পরিবেশকে যত্ন করতে হবে, যেরকম পৃথিবীতেও যত্ন করতে হবে, সহযোগিতা করতে হবে। একে অপরকে সহযোগিতা করলে আল্লাহ তাআলা খুশি হন।
আমার এই 2 বছরে যে শান্তি ক্লাসটা করছি, একটাতে শিখায় আমার এই ক্লাসটা পানিতে বড় ভুল হয়েছে। আর এই হাতে শান্তি ক্লাস থেকে আমরা সবাইকে অনেক সহযোগিতা করেছি, সহযোগিতা শিখেছি। এই হাতে আমরা সেটাই বলেছি।
শান্তি শিক্ষা শিশুদের জীবনে শান্তির বীজের মতো, যার ফল হয়তো দ্রুত পাওয়া যাবে না ঠিকই, কিন্তু ধীরে ধীরে এর ইতিবাচক প্রভাব শিশুদেরকে আরও মানবীয় করে তুলবে, যা ভবিষ্যৎ সমাজের জন্য অতীব জরুরি বলে শান্তিমিত্র মনে করে।
I'm Subarna Polidrong, working in Shanti Mitra. It's a non-profit organization, and I am working here as an executive director. Since 10 years, I'm working in peace building and conflict transformation field. So before sharing about my source of hope, I would like to just share that my thoughts about hope, that what is hope for me. So for me, hope is power force of life. It gives us energy to move forward. And it's a feeling that that things will turn out in better or can be changed. So in my childhood, I knew a proverb where that he who has health, he has hope, and who has hope, he has everything. So that hope is very important in our life. So without hope, we cannot survive. So hope is like a fuel, so which gives us energy and desire to survive, to innovate and discover. So we all need hope during our dark times, difficult relationships, and our daily struggle. Hope gives us the motivation to change, grow, and live fully. So I find hope from many sources. So I find hope from hopeful people, places, and things. And positivity and optimism is a power source or power bank of my hope. So I find hope in positive thinking and being optimistic. So being positive and optimistic doesn't mean that I have to agree or I have to accept everything or overlooking the faults. But positive thinking helps me to focus on the solutions. So, and I find hope from my family and friends to being together and spending quality time with each other, and sharing love and caring others also gives me hope and energy. And working with the people and people's rights, sometimes I realize and feel that I receive much from people as I do for them. And positive feedbacks and responses from the people give me hope and courage, and believe that change is possible. I get inspiration and hope to move forward by reading books and stories of role models who work for peace and justice. The nature also gives me hope by adorns itself in different seasons. Reading books and listening and singing the music is also uplifting, creates positive energy and vibes and hope. I find hope from my faith also. So hope is like a music for me, or like a rain which resonate our hearts and helps us to move forward and to do something new and take risk. And healing for me is that when we are free from suffering, free from hatred, or free from injustice. We all want ideal world where we expect that everyone will be valued, everyone will be healthy, everyone will be happy, and everyone will be free from suffering. But we know that reality is not like that. Rather, we see that every day horrible things are happening around us in the world. So to bring transformation or healing to the world, we have to identify the root causes of the pain or the problems. Those problems which gave us much pain, make us restless or trouble. It can be like communalism, stereotype, and prejudice, power abuse, injustice, corruption, greediness, selfishness, etc. So we have to work against it to heal the world. We cannot do much alone, but together we can do so much. But we can start individually small things with great love. We can contribute for healing for the world by spreading the message of love, empathy, acceptance of diversity, forgiveness, sacrifice, and justice. We have to start with our own individual healing. Someone said that when we heal part of ourselves, we also heal the part of the world. So for healing, it's not necessary with big arrangements or things. The small things can also help to heal our heart. One of the example can be a smile. The Mother Teresa said that we will never know how much a simple smile can do. A smile doesn't cost a cent, but it can make the day for someone. And forgiveness is a powerful weapon for healing. Much of pain we experience in our life every day is self-created through our thoughts and beliefs about circumstance. When we accept responsibility of our experience and feelings, we learn that we have more control over our lives than thought. We can't control what happens in the world around us, but we can choose how we interpret and interact with. So cleaning up our thoughts and forgiving ourselves is a great start. Even forgiving others makes us free from hatred and heal us. So at the last, just I want to say that Being hopeful gave me strength, energy, and pushed me to move forward. Also, healing can be a start from hope. So let hope heal us and change us, and let hope let us heal the world together. Thank you.
I think we all agree these are 4 dynamic women making a difference in their parts of the world. Before we begin our panel discussion, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Agatha Pratt. Agatha spent 33 years at UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. Over her career, she worked at the New York headquarters and country offices in Africa, Asia, and Central America as a health and nutrition child survival program manager. Her focus was primarily on women and children managing health and nutrition, education, and community development. Agatha received her Master's of Public Health from New York University, specializing in international community health. She speaks several languages, and this helped her accomplish many of her program goals in the countries she worked during her lengthy career. Agatha is very active in her church, Marble Collegiate Church, where she serves as a deacon. She is also a board member of Intersections International. She will now share some reflections on what she's learned from the field after more than 3 decades in support of global women and children. Please let us welcome Agatha Pratt.
Thank you, Marcia. I don't think 10 minutes can cover what I want to say or what I want to share with you. I am so happy to be amongst you and to have heard really powerful, very powerful sharing from 4 powerful speakers. And mine perhaps will not even dent that. I feel that the fabric is woven across the globe, across boundaries, faith communities, and all the aspects that affect women and bring to the forefront their voices. And we want to hear them loud and clear. I want to share with you just 3, it's many, but just 3 of my experiences. And the first one was powerful women, was in Niger, a French-speaking country, where our projects are spread all over the world. And in each country, we have projects in education, in health, in all the different aspects of holistic looking at what the problems are in the country and dealing and helping. I had to go out to just visit, because we have to do it, project sites. And this is something I left that country with. I can see it in my mind's eye, just feeling how women really deal with their problems. I went out to the community and I was speaking with some of these very powerful grassroots level people. These are all women. They have been planting seeds for corn. It got to the time for harvesting, and I just happened to be there. It wasn't well-timed. Maybe it was well-timed, but it wasn't my planning to be there at this time. And actually they all have leaders in communities. One of the women came up to me and said, "Madam, thank you very much for all the assistance we've been given." And I was actually looking at fields and fields of corn that had been planted, ready and waiting for harvesting. And the lady said to me, "Madam, just look at what we have done. All those months of hard labor they had planted these fields. And I could see them, stretches and stretches of them." And then she said to me, and this is a drought-prone country, Niger. It doesn't rain all the time, or even just a few months that you need it to rain. So they have been stricken with a real drought. And she said to me, she plucked off one of the corn, which was supposed to have been ready for harvesting. And she said, she looked at me and she said, just feel this. And she felt the corn, and all we got was powder. Powder. That's what the corn was giving, meaning that there had been no rain, it was just drought, and everything is lost. But the reason I'm bringing this up, that hope, and she said, Madam, we're coming back for planting season, and we're going to plant, and we're going to hope that the next harvesting will be better. I looked at that woman, I looked at all of them, and I said, wow, this is truly hope, faith, resilience, all of it all wrapped into one. My next visit to one of the other sites was in Lesotho, Southern Africa. And we were going with a package, we always do, saying, noting that this is a very far off village. And if some of you know Lesotho, it's really mountainous. It's next to South Africa, it's real mountain. And so one of these project sites that we chose was in the mountains. And before I went there, my counterpart, we always have counterparts I'm working with in health, we have a Ministry of Health counterpart. And she said to me, Madam, let me tell you something. We're gonna go, but I want to warn you that what you will be doing as we drive to get to this particular community, you will be going across the river. You'll go 7 times, you'll be crossing that, 17 times, I'm sorry. You'll be crossing that same river. And I thought, she's just kidding. She cannot be saying the truth. I didn't think she wanted to scare me, but I just thought it was just impossible. And so we're driving, and she said, and we got to the first, she said river, but I would say the streams, okay, not rivers. And he said, start counting as we got to the first crossover. Start counting, and I started counting. And honestly, I counted 17 times that we crossed that same stream. We got to the village, and this is the important part. We got to the village, we met these women, and we started talking, and we said, we're here for the first time, but we'll be coming back. We have to do it 3 times to make sure that they own the project. You're not just going and telling them what you want to do, but you want to hear from them. So I said to the leader, the community leader, who's a female, this is what we've come to. Can we sit down and talk? We're going to do sanitation projects, some nutrition projects, some pre-education projects. And she said to me, she got up, and she was a biggish. And she got up and he said, you listen to me, Madam, thank you very much for coming, but please listen to me. We have needs, and we have prioritized our needs. So I'm gonna tell you, we have to cross, I'm sure you crossed those streams when you were trying to get here. We have to cross those very streams 3-4 times to get to the other village, to another community where we can grind our corn, our maize. And she said, what we want first of all, if you can do it, is to provide us with a grinding machine, a milling machine, so that we don't have to go, and they go across those streams, across to the community with their babies on their backs, okay? And they leave their families and they go for hours and get back. If you can provide us with a milling machine, we will do everything else. We will work with you. And I said, and we said, okay, we'll be coming back. And we did. And I tell you, because one thing I must say to you, she said to me, when our children or we all go to the latrine that you want to come and support us with, we have nothing to get out because we don't have enough food. So the latrines will come, yes, but we need to get the food. We need to have this milling machine in our own community. The third one I want to share with you, this was in Nepal, in Asia. And and it's sad in a way because they were having the Maoist war there against the government. But what I respected and I saw hope and healing there is that we tried to get across, to get to these places where we had to do vaccinations, we have to give health education, and we were scared too, but we had to do what we had to do. And we got there, and here were these women with their children ready to vaccinate. There were Maoris sitting next to me, okay? They didn't know really who I was, thank God, but my counterparts apparently knew they were there. But here were these women defying all odds to get their children there, to get vaccinated. I tell you, knowing that there is hope somewhere, there will be peace in that country, and their children need to be healthy to get there, to do what they have to do in the end. And these were women. And as I said, the hope, the faith, the trust that things will happen were all there. And I just want to say this. I've heard a lot about resilience, power to the people, justice, healing, peace, education, peace building, sacred work, hope, and healing. And I believe just these few stories I've shared with you emboss all of that, and empowerment, and the trust, and the hope, and moving forward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Agatha. Thank you. I tell you, there's been such richness in the stories and the voices we've heard this morning. And so we're about to engage in a panel discussion, but we'd love our audience to participate with us. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. Keep populating the chat like you've been doing. We're very appreciative. My goodness, I so enjoyed the comprehensive offering from Madame Agnes Aboom of the World Council of Churches, for example, because she gave us such a comprehensive layout of the impact of COVID-19 there, the impact on family, on churches, on business, on unemployment, the impact on school closures. I mean, it was just so full. It gives us an idea of how this disease has touched the world. But I've heard several of our speakers speak to the weaponization of women's bodies, the sexual and gender-based violence. And I think I'd like to begin there because this is a conversation of global women coming together in this virtual platform to talk about what's happening out there, what are the needs that we're seeing, and how we can come together as a global community to have impact, and how we're using our faith tradition as we show up. So if we're talking about the uptick in violence against women and women's bodies, I would like us to just sort of share what we're finding. And perhaps we'll begin with you, Yvonne, because Yvonne, you spoke so beautifully about stretching shoes, about your personal experience with COVID, and you've got your elbows to the plow doing the work of anti-sexual trafficking. So tell us a little bit about this weaponization. Tell us a little bit about what are the hard parts of your work and how your faith informs that. You gave us so much about hope and healing, but let's talk about the weaponization of women's bodies a little bit to start off our discussion, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Marcia. It's so great to hear such a breadth of perspective of what's happening around the world. But I think for us, what I tend to see is this idea that women are, at least in my context in Nigeria, that women are less than, right? So there's patriarchy that just is weaved in almost every aspect of our work. And so any effort, right? So whether it's through legislation or through economic empowerment is met with the sort of resistance that forces you to kind of step back because there's not really that supportive inclusion, right, of women, because I mean, we're still, I think, quite decades behind as far as how the power that women bring to the table. There's the lack of understanding of what that diversity is, and the force and the change and the impact, right? We know that when we empower women, whether it's through education, they put more money into their children's education, into their community. But there's a lack of understanding about what that actually can do to elevate all of us comprehensively. And so I think what we then find in Nigeria is this weaponization of women's bodies, right? So when you look at the fight, the fight against the terrorist group Boko Haram, which is happening in the northeast of Nigeria, again, women there bear the brunt, right, of terrorism. And if you look at, maternal mortality, FGM, child sex abuse, and with women and girls that are out of school, you see that those percentages are so much higher because there is a systemic effort to keep women in the place of subjugation. So as an example, we look at, the law on rape in Nigeria. Except for a handful of states, it's still legal. Well, it's not criminalized to rape your wife. You're allowed to enforce what they refer to as grievous bodily harm, as long as it doesn't result in death to your partner or to your children. And so you see, I think what we see then is this weaponization that also in some ways then impacts women themselves, right? So you have women who you are now, in addition to to trying to push against some of these things that are systemically within our context, the women themselves have been so disempowered that it takes a whole lot of transformation to even get them to start to believe in themselves. And so that's why I say that it's not just about speaking truth to power, it's also about speaking truth to the seemingly powerless, right? By returning that agency, returning that self-determination. And so that's a second layer of work that is even sometimes more difficult than what we're trying to do as far as breaking down the systemic parts of it. And so it's, and I'm sure many people in the developing world as well, and to a certain extent in the US face some of these things. But I think that's just an added complication that we've not yet been able to force our way through. And so that's why for me, stretching tight shoes sometimes doesn't necessarily require us to come to the table with smiles on our face. Sometimes it requires to put on the entire weapon and have your shield and and have the kind of thing that will result in the dismantling of some of these inequities, right? And that takes work. It takes courage. It takes boldness, because nobody nobody wants to give up power in any way that will serve the community, primarily because there's a lack of that understanding of what that power can bring for all of us collectively.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm really curious to ask any of our panelists, what are some of the faith traditions or rituals that help you to really shore yourself up to do the hard work? Because if you're going to show up to make a difference in the world, what are some of the other ways that you do this? I mean, we see the uptick in domestic violence. We see what's happening as an impact of COVID. We know that there's a lot of psychosocial trauma happening. We can't bury our dead the way we're used to burying our dead. There's a stigma once you're diagnosed. So how do we, as women of faith, different faith traditions, how do we dig deeply? And what do we go to? Like, are there certain things that we do? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? Is it journaling? What works for some of you? And I throw that open. to Anika, to Agatha, to Tahila, Melissa. What are your thoughts about that? Digging a little deeper in our faith tradition to show up for the work.
I guess I'll go first. Thank you for that question, Marcia, and thank you for all the panelists on this call today. It was so inspiring to hear all of your stories, and also the stories of similarities across the world of what women and children are going through. But I guess, you know, one of the hardest things about this time is being separated, you know, from your loved ones and not being able to see them, or, you know, keeping social distance and all of that. But then at the same time showing up, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was such great fear by our staff members to go out because, you know, we were doing food drives. We were trying to, you know, get food to the community. We were we had to be out in the community, and there was this fear. But, you know, at the same time, so many people showed up as well. And they showed up because if they didn't show up, who would, you know? And I think in our faith tradition, again, you know, we consider these challenges, we consider these, you know, whether it's a pandemic, an accident, or whatever, as tests to see where we are in our moral compass, and to really, these hardships are tests to strengthen our own faith and be even more, you know, giving, because by giving is the way that we are able to strengthen our own faith and be closer to God. So I see that as a practice of myself and of some of my colleagues and friends, that, you know, you can't stay holed up. You have to go out. You have to be able to break out of that fear, because, you know, whatever has happened is you know, it's a test to you know, of your moral and human kind of charity.
Okay. Anyone else would like to weigh in on that question?
I think Agatha had her hand up.
Agatha?
I'm calling you out.
I did. I was waiting for you all.
No need to be polite, Agatha.
Having worked across, I mean, different countries and with different faiths, and actually witnessing and seeing. For instance, let's give an instance, and I mentioned one of the stories from Niger. It's a Muslim country. And maybe because it was so many years ago, I did not feel any type of this barrier, obstacle, to even worshiping. So that was not even in question. In fact, I was guessing Muslims coming to my church, our so-called church. It was a small church, and we were sharing experiences. And I recall our country office actually built, because we had been given this space to build our own office, that the representative decided to make space for prayers, so that they wouldn't have, the Muslims wouldn't have to go out each time to pray. So they had their small space built there, right on the grounds. And so the faith that helped me, I mean, I kept up, of course, whenever I enter the country, the first thing I look for is a church. Where is the church? So I go and I pray, and that, I think, my faith held up, knowing that God is in charge, in control, and I can do everything and anything that He wills me to do.
Thank you, Agatha. Thank you, Agatha. I really want to be conscious of including the audience as well, and we've had some audience questions come in. And so let me ask one of them. As women of faith, how do we reconcile with faith traditions or people using religious beliefs to justify gender-based oppression? What do you guys think of that? As women of faith, how do we reconcile with faith traditions or people using religious beliefs to justify gender-based oppression? That's the question. Who would like to take a stab at that? Just unmute your microphones. And Anika, I love that I heard a little child in the background. Anika, is that your little one?
My little 3-year-old, he's sitting right next to me. I'm trying to contain him. Well, but I guess you also heard him, but you know, that's okay. That's what family life working from home.
Exactly. We welcome it.
But I wanted to actually ask this question because, answer this question because it's quite important. As I mentioned in my presentation, you know, domestic violence and violence against women had gone up exponentially throughout our communities here in New York City. And one of the first things we did was we actually engaged an imam to provide a community education a presentation on how this is absolutely wrong and against the faith traditions of Islam to engage in any type of violence against women. And he debunked so many of our myths, so many of the myths that are held within the traditions, because, you know, there's so much education that needs to happen even within our communities, within the Muslim communities, to educate the diversity. Within our diverse communities about the role of women in Islam and that they're held at such an elevated level. So for us, you know, the way we reconcile is through education and educating our people, our own community on what the real faith traditions are in our faith.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Saborna, I wanted to ask you about this wonderful idea of giving seeds of peace to young people, because when you sow peace into young children, I think it will impact generations to come. So could you talk a little bit about the long-term effects of the work you're doing at Shanti Mitra?
Thank you. So yes, we are working with children and also young people. So our how to say it, our vision is that to if we want to eat fruits, then we have to plant a seeds. And when we plant a seed, then the tree grows, and then we can, then when tree grows, and then maybe we will get some fruits from it. So we thought that if we start with the children, so children are very open to learn and very open to accept. So we thought that if we start with the children, then children will take that learning so easily, and that they can use it in their life. So that's why we start with children this peace education, and really we see that how it impacts in their life. Even we are working with the young people, so we give many workshop and seminars with them, especially with the different faith young people we work. So we also do some like interreligious dialogue with them every month. So it creates much like much space and friendship with different young people. And we thought if there is a friendship, so and when we understand to each other, then I think the many things becomes easy. And actually the stereotypes and prejudice, so this kind of things actually divide us. So so when we actually try to how to say, inspire or encourage young people to make friendship among different faith, and try to how to say, accept the differences. So we tell them that to how to move to tolerance, to acceptance, to engagement. So when we engage with each other, so it's like we understand each other, then how to say it, the society can be how to say more beautiful, or how to say, we can create a space for everyone. So and yes, and we think that these young people who are receiving or who are attending in that dialogue, so maybe when they will go to the community or go to the society, so they will be how to say contribute their learnings in that society, or yeah, they will use the learnings in their families, in their society, in their community. So so I think, yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. So let's take another question from our audience. And Stephanie Bailey has a question for our panelists about just how dangerous is this work that you're doing? Like, can you speak a little bit more about your own safety, particularly with respect to potential violence? So like, for example, Agatha, when you were working at UNICEF, you were in some pretty dangerous places. I know that you go back to Nigeria often, Yvonne. So can you ladies speak to the violence? Suborna, if there's something you would like to add, is it dangerous as you do this work of advocacy on behalf of marginalized communities? Anika, please, anyone? I'd love to hear your response to that particular question about safety.
Well, safety for me, you work with an organization that sends people everywhere, right? And you don't consider, first of all, your own safety, really. You just go. And I have worked in countries, for instance, in Niger, next door, the president was assassinated, and I was actually in the office when this happened. I worked in Lesotho, and then we had the assassinations there. We had the whole kingdom going crazy. And yes, I was there. And of course, with the next door, with the big power next door, South Africa, all the killings going, and actually their citizens trying to get into Lesotho for safety. And I actually was there when Mandela was released, Nelson Mandela. But yes, you guard yourself the best way you know how. And I talked about being in the Maoist territory in Nepal, and you're just there to do the work that you were sent to do. But you take care, you take all the precautions necessary. That's what you have to do. And
I also think, I think you're right, Agatha, but I think you also have to be prayed up. In your own faith tradition, you just got to be prayed up, covered from head to toe.
Exactly.
When you go to do this work. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that?
I'll just add that, I think for me, I always start with the reminder that this is what God has called me to do, right? And that in itself sort of lays a foundation of hope and peace, right? In many ways. And, I was having a conversation with my mom recently, and because she now forces me to, travel with security whenever I'm going around, because I think, anytime you make an effort to start to, break down some of these inequities and social structures, it's not just, the people who are the traffickers that you're fighting against, but there are also people within the government that are unhappy about the end of some of these things. And so I think, for me, it's just important to always, be careful, but to also understand the spiritual aspect of it and the warfare that's happening as well. And you know, so I have a team of intercessors that pray for me, because it's just not, you know, it's not something you just walk into without being called to it. I think it really has to, you know, sit at your foundation, the significance of the calling. And like Agatha was saying, then you just go and you just pray that, you know, all things work together for our good to those who are called and according to his purpose. So.
It's almost like you can't not do the work, because it is a calling. It's like you have to do it. So you have to find ways, and God will make a way, right? So as women of faith, what are some real ways that we can build community? What are some real ways that we can continue to do this work, be in the hard places, but respectful of our faith traditions, but really all aligned and committed to justice in the world? What are some ways we can build community as people of faith? And this is open to any of our panelists, any of our folks who offered us interfaith, multi-faith prayers at the beginning, whatever feels comfortable, but it's a real question that I'm asking about building community, not just for this conversation and tomorrow's conversation, but into the future. How do we coalesce to do that?
I think I'll take a stab at this as well. I think bringing it together in these types of forums is a way to build community. I mean, I'm so honored to meet all of these distinguished panelists from all over the world, but engaging in these types of forums and panels are definitely a way to do that. And, you know, we have these interfaith events as well with Marble Collegiate Church, Intersections International, and All Angels Church, all these different faith traditions all over the world, in order to build a community, an interfaith community of peace builders, of practitioners who are in the field and doing this type of good work. So I think bringing us together and sharing our stories and bringing practitioners together like all of you is a great way to build community.
Thank you, Anika. Anyone else wanted to weigh in on that question?
I have a little something. I would say,
thank you.
You're welcome. I would say I have twice in the pandemic realized that when I have a deep yearning and need, I reach out to my interfaith colleagues and sisters and siblings to resolve it together. So when everything was happening during the middle of the pandemic and our country was more fully called to reconcile with our inherent racism, there was so much pain already with the pandemic, and then recognizing that there was always an underlying pandemic that not all of us with this particular skin were particularly aware of. And with all the multitudes of pains and people being sick, we reached out to each other and we came together in prayer and we said the things that we had to say, and not everything that was shared with friends, with colleagues, was simple, was easy. And I would say having people to reach out to when you need something and knowing they likely have the similar needs has been very profound. And similarly, you're part of a conversation around God. Somebody asks, what's the text that gets you through things? The people of text get me through this time. The people who are willing to grapple with our texts, share our texts, and then decide what we're going to do in the world because of those texts. That's how I see community happening now, and hopefully well into the future. And that's how faith resides in me right now.
Thank you. Thank you. We probably have time for just one or two more comments or one last question before we move along, because the time just goes so quickly, but I've been enjoying what we're just at the tip of the iceberg, right, in this conversation. But let's see if we have one last audience question that we can do. Reverend Cheryl Dudley had a question. Was there something that gave you guys pause? Was there a comment that another panelist made today that gave you pause? Or was there an intersection in their comments and work with your own work that you found very helpful to hear? That's Reverend Cheryl Dudley asking that question, and she'll actually be with us tomorrow. But did you hear something this morning that gave you pause? Well, it's morning where I am, but it's probably afternoon and evening in other places. But was there something that gave you pause? I know hearing several speakers address the violence against women, that just sort of jumped out at me immediately, and I wanted to start the conversation there. But was there anything else that resonated? Agatha, I know when you spoke of resilience and the corn and the dust, I mean, that's just heartbreaking. But we learn, right? We learn from that. So anyone like to weigh in?
I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna be rude. I'm gonna ask from all of us here, the thing that really affected me was hearing several times how children are not safe at home. And that was one of the things that I thought of immediately as the pandemic came upon us. I'm in charge of supporting the spiritual lives of so many children who are mostly safe, but I know that that is not true throughout our city. And I know that it is so invisible and it is so also palpable at the same time. And I know that there is wisdom here and there's passion here and there's hope and faith here. What do we do? How do we help the children we don't see who are home in places that should be the safest and are the most dangerous and the most hidden?
It's a hard question. It's a hard question. So perhaps we have to not perhaps, I think we have to figure out a way. But I see that it's the same. It doesn't matter where you're born. You know, everyone loves their children, right? Everyone understands family. So I think we have to figure ways forward. All right. Any closing comments before we move on to the next section? Anything that anyone is dying to say before we go?
If I could just add
Melissa.
from that last idea, I think one thing that's really important is that we're always aware of the people that God has put in our lives and the context that God has given us, so that when crisis happens, when events happen, we already have that link. And that, you know, that's what we can play on. If we know children, then like for now with COVID, if we know of children, then we can kind of put our feelers out. How are they doing? So I think that's something that we just, not just in crisis, but all the time, preparing ourselves to be ready for what might come our way and how God might use us in that situation.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that because it takes us right back to the source. So whatever your faith tradition, you have to go to that source, because that's what I believe shores you up so that you can show up every day to do the hard work of advocacy, whether it's for children, sexually trafficked women, whether it's around food insecurity. I mean, there's such a long list of amazing work that's needed in the world. And I just think that when we shore ourselves up from a faith tradition, we can do all sorts of things, because it's not really us doing it, right? It's really God in us. So thank you all. Thank you all for participating. Oh, is that your 3-year-old? Hello, we heard you. I love it. Our next generation of activists. Yes. So thank you all so much. We're going to do, there is a section coming up where we'll sort of cull some of the things we talked about, but right now you're in for a real treat.
And the second mantra that we're going to chant is called the Siddhi Gayatri mantra. And this is known as one of the most healing mantras on the planet. Rama Dasa Sase Soham. So for this mantra, we come into a position, which is, we come into a hand position, a mudra, flattening the hands and bringing the heels tightly into the body, and the elbows are tightly into the body, closing the eyes. And imagine capturing the radiant healing energy of the universe in your hands. So I welcome you to join us with this mantra and meditation for healing, and allow yourself to direct that healing to yourself and anyone else, to communities and to your loved ones and to the whole planet. We can extend our love and healing energy.
Rama Dasa Sase Soham 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 Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you. Wasn't that beautiful? The sand artist was exquisite, and then the music just now, the metra. Okay, so now we're just going to take a few minutes to sort of cull some of what we've been hearing and experiencing in the chat and the questions that have come in. And I'm going to share some things, and I'd love for anyone to weigh in with anything additional. So these minutes are just to sort of hit some of our high points of what our discussion has been. And so if I'm going back to the chat, I know Madame Aboum was not able to join us, but I just so appreciated her comprehensive overview of the impact that COVID has had in her home country of Kenya and the role of the World Council of Churches, and just how she really hit so many pieces of how we're impacted. I think the whole world is impacted as we look at how COVID-19 has infiltrated so many parts of our lives and our world. And I think that connects us, I loved how my dear friend Yvonne spoke about stretching tight shoes and how her mom would do that by, like, you know, trace the feet on pieces of paper and stretch tight shoes. And that sort of set the tone for the advocacy that she would later do. Yvonne has not shared, but she comes from a family of advocacy. So it is not surprising and shocking to me that this is her work today. And she is just having tremendous, tremendous impact in the world. The intergenerational approach to this, I think, is really important. We have Anika's toddler, and then we have Gavin, who's 14, and then we have a plethora of ages after that. So I think when we look to do this work, when we include everyone in all ages, there are lessons to be learned, and intergenerational really feels like the approach, because there's so much that young people have to say, and there's so much that our elders have to say, and all of those in between. So if we look to intergenerational approach, I think we do ourselves good work. Let's see. I think something else that resonated for me today was just the trauma that COVID has caused. There's a lot of trauma. You cannot bury your dead the way that you wanted. And just humor me for one moment. There is a dear friend of our families, Reverend Johnson, who was a missionary in Africa for many, many years. He died last week of a heart attack. And he and his wife have been married for decades. And she was able to take him to the hospital, but she wasn't able to stay with him, and he died. And so he didn't die of COVID, he died of a heart attack. But COVID causes trauma, and there will be a community that will come to support Mrs. Johnson, but it's really heartbreaking, the effects of what this disease has done and continues to do until we can get our hands wrapped around it globally. So I just wanted to lift up the name of a man of God who has done amazing work in so many regions in Africa, who went home to God just last week. And so the trauma of COVID is real. I think something else we wanted to lift up is the sexual and gender-based violence that we heard many of our speakers talk about, the domestic violence, the uptick of that, and then the anxiety that children suffer in the home, and how it really is up to the adults in the room to protect children. So we have to think of real ways of how to do that. A lot of young people who are sexually trafficked are that begins very young. So we have to think about what are ways of attacking these very large problems. And I think if we ask them as a global community, it serves us. Okay, Faith shores us up. Hope as an act of resistance. Thank you, Yvonne. I just love that idea. Hope as an act of resistance, as an African woman showing up at the table, as any woman showing up at the table. And I was talking with my colleague, Tom Ferry, and he had a really interesting question that he wanted me to pose to our group. And it is around this idea as women in your field, women leaders in your field, do you feel pressure to conform to certain roles as women in your field? And anyone can jump in and weigh in on that. But I wanted to bring that forward because I think there might be the pressure to do that. So what do you think about that? Or am I speaking to women who don't conform? The mic is open. Everyone's so polite and waiting for the next person.
I see so many smiles of agreement with you, Marcia. I am not going to be the most profound, but I will say I have had women in leadership or rising in leadership talk to me about crying and apologize for crying, and leaders don't do that. And I said, not the leaders yet, but certainly part of a small piece of female leadership not needing to mirror previous male leadership is that all the feelings come to the table. They are all productive. They are not used in service of anything but getting to the truth and feeling the wholeness of either your own pain or someone else's. That I think that is a completely different leadership. So that's just my.
Thank you. Thank you, Tahila. Anyone else? Okay. Did I hear something? Or I imagined that. Okay, I'm going to continue on my list of what's in the chat. Hope seeks out hope and connects like-minded people. I believe we're all like-minded people. Seeds of peace to impact the next generation. I love the work of Shanti Mitra. Yes, really empowering our young people. There was another question that came in through Facebook. Are there certain sacred texts or scriptures that have helped you navigate this past year? 2020, I mean, no one will forget the year 2020. So are there certain sacred texts that you turn to? And that's open to any of our panelists. That you turn to, I know for me, it's the Bible. I know that with every reading, there is some food there that feeds me. And it's almost as though even if I open it up randomly, there would be some message God is giving to me. If I'm open, if I say a prayer and then open it, there's something that God has for me. So that's what I would offer. Is there anyone else that would offer some kind of a sacred text or something that you do?
I'll jump in here.
Good.
I love texts, and so across the spectrum of what feeds my soul, I would start with Torah. I would also look to the 66 books that are comprised as the Protestant Bible. I would also offer up, if you haven't, a book of Buddhist wisdom from women from the 4th century forward. It's called A Hidden Lamp. And it's a collection. We use it sometimes in our office here at Intersections. A Hidden Lamp, wisdom of Buddhist women throughout the centuries. And then also I was so pleased that we had folks with us sharing today from the Kundalini tradition of yoga, and that's not one that a lot are exposed to. So not only the Gitas, the Gita in terms of the Bhagavad Gita, of the generalized understanding of Hinduism, but also here at Intersections, we do Yoga Sutra study. And I think that as part of a yoga practice, which is part of a silence and meditation practice, and I think, and others who are on this session with me can speak, but I have found that those sutras also bring illumination to life on the planet. And we are all together. I won't spend much time with the mic because I'm going to have to come and speak in a moment, but nothing has illuminated that like COVID-19, the reminder that we share the air, the reminder that we share water, the reminder that we're not alone, even when we have created thousands of years of scaffolding around illusions that suggest we can be independent and we are alone. We are not. We have created all sorts of quite complex structures to isolate, to objectify, to minimize, to oppress, but COVID-19 has helped us show that that little strange ball with its strange look can stop at the wealthiest billionaire's home and stop in the most impoverished village of refugees. It can stop a world in its tracks, a world that's accustomed to multitasking, accustomed to being on jets. We had all, at least on this group, had planned many travels together. And even this conference would have been in Muscat with all of us coming in together. But those are the texts that I would offer up to the group.
Thank you. Thank you. Very rich food. Thank you. All right. So let's see here. And I think the last thing was what was on the sand artist at the very end of the sand artist. Let me go to my chat and read that because I thought it was so profound. Let's find it here. At the very end, it's about illusion. And I meant to write it down, but then I got, let's see here.
I typed it into the chat.
Yeah,
Martha.
Yep, I'm looking for it right now.
Okay, I'll grab it if you can't
Can you
find it.
read it for me? Like
Yes,
yeah,
certainly.
Thank
certainly.
you. Yeah, yeah, about illusion.
Yep, got it.
Yep.
Illusion is illusion is half the sickness.
Yeah.
Tranquility is half the medicine.
Yes.
And hope is the first of healing.
Yes. So those are the things that resonated for me in the chat. Did I miss anything large? Like if I didn't miss anything, then we're going to go to closing remarks. All right, so let's do that. I would now like to invite Reverend Justin Myers, the Associate Director of the Amana Center, to give us closing remarks on our day. Reverend Justin.
Thank you, Marcia. It's been my extreme honor and privilege to listen in today. And it's also been a great thing for me. My son has been chatting with me from downstairs on WhatsApp all night and just so excited. So the father of two boys, it's so good for me to have something to show them what is happening in the world, what is good, what is hopeful. And it's even better yet that it's coming from all women, because he hears his dad pontificate a lot about this kind of stuff. And I'm just so glad for him to hear all these other these other voices. And I want to send greetings from our country here in Oman. One of the things that Sultan Qaboos, Majid Sultan Qaboos said before he died is he urged us to work toward a shared human values. And that's been picked up here, is that, you know, we have across our religions, across our cultures, we have these values that we hold as humans, and that there is a value to every human life. And that whether it's in Africa or Asia or America, or South America, you know, there are values that we share and that we need to strive for these. And I think one of the things that I've heard from religious leaders here is that, you know, we can go back to Abraham, at least of the Abrahamic faith, and go back to Abraham, but we can't actually really discuss that till we go back to Adam and Eve and realize that we're all human first. And that God created us male and female together. And that until we recognize our shared humanity, we can't really do much else. And I think that's one of the things that I've been hearing, not explicitly said tonight, but said implicitly in many ways. And this is always echoed by the woman who I call my Omani mother, Umi Naima, who is at the Grand Mosque here. And she says this to almost every guest is, you know, we are all humans, and God looks at us all as one humanity. And the Quran says that God intentionally made us different so that we will have to learn about each other, but we are all still human. And so I'll leave it with Umi Naima's wisdom that, you know, we need to get right with God. We need to honor God, look to God for our strength and our ticket to the places that we want to go, that we feel God calling us. And so thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your wisdom. And thank you for joining us today. I hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Justin. And now, Reverend Julie Johnson Staples, can you give us your closing remarks?
Yes, thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you everyone for being here. It's just such an incredible pleasure to be part of this. And I wanted to share first a poem, and then I'd make some remarks. The poem is from 1927, written by Max Ehrmann. I'm going to use a little bit of it today and a little bit of it tomorrow. It's called Desiderata. Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others. Even to the dull and the ignorant, they too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. And I just wanted to stop there. I'll add some more tomorrow to close it out. But what I heard today was incredible. Beyond the stretch tight shoes, which we can all so identify with, I heard hope as an act of resistance. I heard hope seeking out beauty. I heard hope over circumstances. I heard hope is a healer that envisions an alternate reality. I heard hope that seeks out and ignites a community of light. And I heard that hope endures. And I heard that across faith traditions, across geographies, without borders, the boundless love and healing that comes through hope. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for each of you. I'm grateful for your work. And I'm grateful that we'll pick this up tomorrow because it's amazing and you are amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend Julie. Thank you.
Screaming loud at the wind, going round and round, hoping things change, fighting battles old as antebellum times. Everything to lose, nothing gain. God gave you dreams too big, time big enough, generations yet to come. Stay the course, you're not finished yet. There is so much more for you. Stay the course, it ain't over yet. We stand together. Throw your head inside the ring, pray to summon strength to change the world. Try to build a better world than we've ever seen. Failure hanging low, but sky holds. God gave you dreams too big, bigger than one lifetime. Big enough, generations yet to come. Stay the course, you're not finished yet. There is so much more for you. Stay the course, it ain't over yet. We stand together, we won't lose. And when your strength is gone, and when your will is gone, stand together, we won't lose. Stay the course, you're not finished yet. There is so much more for you.
Thank you all so very much. And do join us again tomorrow, where we will meet women impacting communities in Kuwait and Palestine, Guyana and Germany. We will hear from our keynote speaker, the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Dudley of American Baptist Churches, Reverend Brittany Hanlon of Marble Collegiate Church, and many other faith leaders. We'll experience another slate of talented global artists, hear a Holocaust survivor story, and much more. Thank you all, and see you tomorrow.